Later in this episode,
never got to say goodbye to anybody.
wow,
Family, friends, girlfriend, nothing.
you're being taken.
Literally taken at 4 a.m.
Wow.
No idea where I was going. No.
We are excited to share today's story with you. Please note that some of the topics discussed may be sensitive topics for some audiences. Please read through the show notes for a heads up on the topics discussed and events covered in today's story. If it does not seem like it will be a good episode for you to listen to, we invite you to come back next week to hear our next story. Well, welcome to This Is My Story, a podcast brought to you by Victory Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm your host today, Austin Carrick, and I have the privilege of being here with a good friend of mine, Evan Kerstetter. Evan, go ahead and say hi to the people.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, so we have Evan here today. We're going to talk about Evan's life and what it was like growing up in a Christian family, in a Christian home, and really just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Evan's story takes twists and turns, and it's one of those stories where once he starts telling it, you're just drawn in and like, where is this going?
Yep.
The beautiful thing is there is a redeeming story of Christ's
Amen.
love that Evan recognizes in his life. So we're gonna get into that story a little bit today.
Yeah.
So Evan, go ahead and start. Tell us what it was like growing up. What was it like? What was your home life like? What was your relationship with Christ like as a child?
So I grew up in a Christian home, went to a local church here in Lancaster County, accepted Jesus into my life at age 12, got baptized then shortly after. And then just through that grade school up to high school, it was kind of just like, yeah, I'm accepted. I'm good. Like I can just live my life now. Turns out down the road, that's not the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, home life was great. I mean, I was your normal boy,
Yeah.
just always tapping on things, drumming on things, just crazy,
Yep.
uncontrollable at times.
So Evan is a musician, fantastic
Yes.
and phenomenal drummer, one of the best that I know. So that was always in your life. Was
too
it always
kind.
like tee-tee-tee-tee-tee,
Yeah, so
that kind of
a
thing?
little bit on that story. My mom was sick and tired of me tapping on the walls and stuff. So then that's when I got my first drum set and first drum. So instead of tapping on walls, I was tapping on drums. But yeah, like I said, growing up in the Christian home, it was great. But like you said, it was kind of just walking through life. There was no deeper understanding. There wasn't really like we'd pray before meals, pray before bed. But other than that, it really wasn't a relationship.
Yeah.
It was just like, all right, I said the prayer, I got baptized. People know I'm a Christian. Such is life. Like
Yep.
it is what it is, right? And then as I got older, really is when things started to change. Went to a Christian school, which was great. That really helped solidify my faith, I think, a little bit, just with being around good people with good morals.
Yeah.
Got into public school then. Things started to shift a little bit. Like I wanted to fit in, be popular, whatever, star athlete, your normal, typical high school, middle school,
Yeah.
teenager. And then that's when things, I guess, pretty much went downhill. So this was August of 2015 is when things really, really changed in my life for the worst. Got involved in a not so good relationship. She was taking me down a bad path, and I was so blinded by it. The devil just allowed me to be blinded by just lust and just selfishness.
Yeah.
I started to push away family, friends, all my close friends, and literally it was the two sides of a coin. I was so two-faced,
Wow.
going to school and all that just because of this relationship. I was so focused on her instead of what I needed to be focused on was the big man upstairs. So just things were out of priority.
Yeah. So when you're in something like that, a lot of times people don't recognize it. Did you know you were going down a bad path?
No.
Or were you like, were people speaking into you and like, hey, Evan, I don't know if this is a good idea. And you're like, no, it's good. It's good. We're good. I promise.
And parents were doing that. My mom, especially. My dad is more of the soft-spoken one of the family. Love them to death. Love all my parents. Love both of my parents to death. But yeah, my mom was the one. I mean, mothers love. They know who's right for you, right?
Yeah.
Like I've always heard that, like, oh, the one will come, and I'm like, yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do this on my own type deal. And so that's what it was. I was like, okay, this one's great, she's great, and that's what I thought in my head, but I just didn't see how that relationship was affecting people around me.
Yeah.
It affected grades. More so when I get into the concussion story then too. But so August 2015, going through all that relationship, I knew my parents didn't like the girl or her family, and just started leaning closer to her instead of leaning towards my family and Christ more.
Yeah. So there was like a divide that was
there was
created.
a big divide. The blinders were put on. I just did not want to hear anything that my parents wanted to say.
Yeah.
Just emotionally out of whack. And then August 2015 is when I had a severe concussion. And for some of those who don't know me, I have hemophilia. So it's a big deal to have a brain injury like that, just with internal bleeding and stuff.
So what is hemophilia?
Yeah, hemophilia, it's a bleeding disorder. You wouldn't know it by looking at me. Like I'm a pretty active guy, skiing, whatever, longboarding, kayaking, biking, hunting, fishing.
Very active.
Very active. So you wouldn't know it. So it's just my blood takes longer to clot, and I take a medication that allows me to live a normal life. So it's really great. So on top of that, the concussion really messed me up. The part of my head that got hit had to deal with anger and irritability. So this is when everything really, really started to snowball. And this is when I really lost control. So like I said, anger and irritability is what the part of my head that got hit. So my mom would breathe at home and I'd flip.
Wow.
Like just... You know when you get angry, right?
Yeah.
I didn't. It was like a flip of a switch.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, well, why am I even angry? Like, I don't know why I'm flipping out at my mom. She didn't do anything.
Yep.
Like, she literally told me to go take the dishes and put them away or take the trash out. And that just, I did not respect authority. I didn't respect my parents at all through that time. So this part with the concussion really, like I said, snowballed things. So it pushed me closer to that unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
And just... home life was a living hell is the easiest way to describe it. So knowing that my parents didn't like her, knowing that I really didn't have anybody. The only person I thought I had in life at that time was the girlfriend and her family, because they were able, like I kind of made my parents out to be these terrible people that didn't want what's best for me.
You victimized yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so they could relate, and they were even like, oh yeah, like, yeah, their parents, man, I wouldn't have handled that situation like that. I just didn't see it. Like, that was so wrong of me to do that.
Yep.
So angry irritability, home life was a living hell. This is when my grades really took a dive. Like, I was a good student. Like I said, I had everything going for me growing up. Christian home, believer, good friends, good family.
Were you in high school at this point?
Yeah, this is high school. This is my junior year, going into senior year. So it really happened over the summer.
So having a concussion, I know you said like athlete, you were doing sports.
Yeah.
Like, did that change any of that for you? Like,
yeah,
did your whole world kind of take a
couldn't
flip?
really take sports. So August is when I got sent away to the ranch. So leading up to August, it was probably about a 4-month period when all this was going on, to make things a little clearer and easier to understand. So just picture a living hell for 4 or 5 months.
All through the summer.
All through even before the summer, like end of school, really. I started self-harming because it was rock bottom for me.
Yeah.
Like, I had nowhere to turn. And as a guy, like, what guy tells other guys their feelings, right? Like, it's just not normal for us to do, which I'll touch on that in part 2 of this, because I think it's very important for anybody who's struggling with anything, that it's not, no one's going to judge you if you're struggling. Like, we're all going to go through things in life. So,
And I think even as somebody who grew up in the church, and I think it's partially something we put on ourselves, but you see that and you're like, oh, well, I don't want to be like one of those worldly men. Like, I need to be a man, and I need to be able to control my own feelings, and I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and all of these things, and not seek help. Especially too when you're like, well, God should be my source of help. which he is, but you hold all those feelings in and you're like, I can't share this to anybody because that's not what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be able to just step through this in righteousness and with faith. And it's hard, especially as a teenager. Like, you're processing all those things and it's just, you bottle them up and until it explodes at some point.
Yeah, and this is when it really exploded.
Yeah.
So the self-harm, parents didn't know about it. No one knew about it. Like I said, it goes to that two-face. I went to school with scars, and no one would have ever known.
Wow.
Home life was hell. No one would have ever known because I just go to school, come back, and it would be hell at home and fine at school. And anytime I went out of the house, and I felt fake. And I think that's the burden I was trying to carry myself instead of doing the healthy thing and telling people or talking to somebody. So with self-harm, I was losing weight, wasn't really eating. It was probably down to like 110, and I'm a pretty big guy, so that was low for me. And then with the concussion, self-harm, stuff was going crazy. My parents then caught on, so they checked me in I was in and out of I don't know, I guess it's like a mental health hold down in the ER at LGH. I was in and out of there 3 times because my parents literally thought like I was all out of whack, chemical imbalances and all that. So we were going on different types of drugs to try to help. Saw a therapist. They diagnosed me with double depression at the time. So like literally like it was rock bottom for me. And so they're just trying to help. And I didn't see it like that.
Very much living a double life.
Yeah.
Do people at school know this kind of stuff is going on? Do people at church know this kind of stuff is going on? Nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
They all think that Evan is still Evan.
I mean, my parents' friends, I'm assuming they had to have known because my parents were talking to all their friends. They were always on the phone with somebody because they're like, their child is literally going down this path. They don't know what to do. So they're seeking help, but I'm not. Which is, I should have been, but I was, like I said, I was so blinded by just lust and just selfishness and everything, I guess. Just with, my focus was on that relationship and I was going to do anything in my power to keep it, which I'll touch on now. So during all this time, we've had cops called to our house 2 to 3 times. One, because of all the yelling, our neighbors called the cops. So then the cops were talking to us. And then the second time, my dad is so gentle and kind, and I love him to death. And he's worked through a lot of stuff himself, so I'm proud of him. Shout out to you, Dad. So I knew my parents were always calling doctors, calling whatever. And it's so stupid of me to do this, but I was like, well, I'm going to take all their phones and keep them so they can't call anybody. So I literally took all the phones in the house, sat them next to me on the couch. And I remember sitting there like this. And then my dad just came up and he tackled me to the ground. I'm sure there was a lead up to that. I wasn't just like, boom, I'm going to tackle you. There's probably a lead up because obviously I instigated it. And we wrestled for a little bit, and I got on top and had my arm across my dad's neck. And like, I couldn't hurt anybody, like even my own family. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to hurt you. And I got off and ran outside and hid. I knew my parents were calling the cops because then cops showed up 5 minutes later. And then every kid knows their neighborhood, right? So like, I knew all the good hiding spots, and like I snuck back in, climbed on the roof, and then I heard him talking about, well, does he have a girlfriend? So I perked up. I'm like, oh crap, I don't want to get her involved. I mean, she knows stuff's going on because I'm texting her and her family because her dad was very close with a lot of the police officers and stuff. So then they were like, well, do you have her address? And at that point, I knew I had to like kind of give myself up. So I sat on the steps and felt like a cool moment, like something in a superhero movie. I was like, are you looking for me? Sitting at the top of the steps, and then we all talked together, and then they cuffed me and put me in the cruiser, and then they took me back to the hospital just for another like 24-hour hold. And then the last time the cops were involved, we were at a soccer game. I was supposed to be helping. It wasn't a mandatory meeting, but I was supposed to help with a field marshal for like line judging and stuff. So my dad and I were doing it, and my dad's like, we're going to go to this meeting. I'm like, no, I'm going to go watch my girlfriend play soccer because they're in, I forget, it was like playoffs or something. So I went, didn't listen to my parents. Kids, always listen to your parents.
Yes, always listen to your parents, please. Especially if you're my kids listening, always listen to your parents.
I've never been so embarrassed in my life. So I'm there sitting with my good friends who didn't know anything was going on at home at the game. My dad went to the meeting. He's texting me, really disappointed in me. He comes over to the game, literally was about to throw hands with her dad. And I've never seen that in my dad in my life. He was so ticked off at me. So they started yelling, the both dads, and I'm like, I'm leaving. So then I ran and hid, and then my parents were all, my mom and my brother were going back on a walk, and here I am just fuming, going home.
Yeah.
And just verbal yelling, threats, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When we got home, just, like I said, rock bottom, man.
Yeah.
Self-harmed again that night. So I was in a low place. And that's the night that I literally showed my parents for the first time. Like, I was like, look what you're making me do. Like, this is your fault.
You put all the blame on them.
Yeah. So that wrecked my mom and my dad. My brother was probably super annoyed at me because I was getting all the attention, and he wasn't even home like half the time because he knew anytime he went home, there was going to be a yelling match, a fight. So I do apologize to him anytime I see him. I feel like I'm like, dude, I know I put you guys through hell, and I'm sorry. So yeah, after all that, cops were coming. I let my girlfriend at the time, dad, know. So he was already like sitting in our development when he came, and they came, cuffed me again, put me in the cruiser, and then was in the hospital again. Yeah, and it was nuts.
Yeah. I can't get past the moment in my head. I'm stuck right now in, are you looking for me? Like, that's what I'm imagining in my head right now, is you swinging through that window in that conversation. I'm just stuck there right now mentally.
I was sitting on the top of the steps,
and it's like raining, and there's like lightning coming behind you. Like, looking for me. I don't know. I'm stuck there.
It felt cool, but it was the stupidest thing I've ever done.
It's probably a lot cooler in both of our heads right now. A lot cooler there.
Yeah, so that, like, and then with the holds at the LGH, my parents knew I had to get like an inpatient help. So then I was inpatient at Phil Haven pretty much the whole summer leading up to August. Like right after school, I was in and out of Phil Haven doing inpatient stuff.
Yeah.
Learned coping skills there. We all need healthy ways to cope, and that's really where I learned some really good, like, I would call it worldly ways to cope, like healthy worldly ways to cope, because I'll talk into the more spiritual ways of coping then, probably in part 2. But yeah, so just in and out of hospitals, crazy stuff going on. Life was a mess. Yeah. A mess, dude. And I look back and I'm like, man, that's like what God has brought me to where I am today. Like it's, like I always grew up, I was like, man, you listen to Lecrae, they used to be drug runners and stuff, and all these other people. I'm like, man, they got a cool testimony. Like, I wish I had something like that. Be careful what you wish for, because later that I know, then I'm getting taken at 4 a.m.
Yep. All right, let's get to that a little bit. So your life at this point, you've already mentioned it as the rock bottom, awful point in your life. You are in and out of, if I say this correctly, like mental institutions. Like you're in and out of mental institutions where they're teaching you different things, which is not a bad thing. We are in physical bodies, so there's sometimes physical therapies that are needed to those physical bodies. So you're in and out of there. You just said 4 a.m. So let's get to that point. Like what are you talking about?
So like I said, my mom was always calling people, and I like clothes. Like I like fashion. Let's just say
You're
that.
trendy.
Yeah,
you are trendy. Yeah, I like it. It's a good word for you.
So I always had my favorite pieces of clothing during this whole time that I would like to wear. And slowly I started noticing that they're not in my drawers. So immediately, being the younger brother, I'm like, Corey, why'd you take my clothes? And he's like, dude, I didn't take your clothes. Like, chill. Little did I know, my mom is secretly packing a bag for a boarding school.
Oh, wow.
And I knew nothing about it. I mean, I kind of knew, but I was just like, they're not going to send me anywhere. Because they originally asked me, like, oh, if you were to go get help, you would need to go voluntary to, like, Valley Forge Military Academy. Looking back, I wish I took that option, but hey, the Lord's got the plans, and you got to follow them. And I was like, no, I'm not. You're not taking me anywhere. I'm not going anywhere voluntarily. So that she was packing a bag for a place where I had to be taken to at 4 a.m. So literally, it was probably after a yelling match. It was August 15th. So I was in bed sleeping, and all of a sudden my lights turned on. And I'm like, what? I'm like, huh? And I look up, and it's not my parents, which is weird.
Whoa.
If any of you have seen the movie Taken, picture that.
Oh my gosh.
So I wake up, and then there's these two big, like, I call them Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and I wish I had their info.
I had a better name for them, yeah.
I did not know their names. They didn't tell me their names at all. They had badges. They weren't cops. I guess they were like contract, like transporters or whatever. And they're like, put this medical boot on, put these gym shorts on, and grab a shirt. So I'm like, okay. No, like, I didn't fight at all, which was weird. So, like, by the grace of God, like, I was just calmed and, like, did what they told me to do.
Yeah.
So that's where things kind of started changing now that I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
They put for those of you who work in healthcare, you'll know what a gait belt is. It's just a belt that medical people put around people to help hold them up and help them walk to regain their strength. So they put that on me so they could hold on. They put me in a medical boot, and I had gym shorts on and gym shoes on, and then a nice t-shirt. And I looked like ridiculous.
For somebody who's trendy, that's not what you wanted to be wearing.
I was
Please
cringing.
do not let anybody see me coming out of this house, not because of what's going on, but because I look ridiculous right now.
that leads into the next part. So little did I know, I'm getting transported to Harrisburg Airport. All I remember is seeing my dad physically cry for like the first time in years. So our house was like the front door, a hallway, steps. All I remember is seeing my dad walk through the other hallway, just crying. Never got to say goodbye to anybody.
Wow.
Family, friends, girlfriend, nothing.
So you're being taken.
Literally taken at 4 a.m.
Wow.
No idea where I was going. No one told me, oh, yeah, you're going to go to Harrisburg and then you're going to go to a boarding school.
You just knew you were going somewhere.
Yeah, a black SUV, like a Tahoe or whatever, and the guy sat in the back with me, and the guy was driving up front. So that's when it clicked. I'm like, oh, like I'm being taken. Because like moment, now I'm awake.
Yep. So what I want to know is we're going to wrap this episode and we're going to do a 2-parter because Evan's got such an incredible testimony and just what God's about to do in his life at this point. So before we wrap this episode, tell us, like, what were your thoughts? You're in the back of this SUV, like, what are you thinking right now? You still don't know where you're going. What are your thoughts at that moment?
Mad, very, very mad. Probably said a few words that I shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
Just very, very mad. Unsure, fear of the unknown, just fearful.
Yeah.
I don't know these people. I don't know where I'm going. Like, who knows?
Can't even imagine. As a teenager, can't even imagine that. As an adult, I can't imagine
17 years old, no idea what's going on.
Wow. Well, thank you, Evan, for being here for this part 1. We're going to split this to a 2-parter. Please join us next week so you can hear the rest of Evan's incredible testimony of just what God did in his life and the way that he was able to meet Evan exactly where he was at and how he always does that for us. So tune in next week, and thanks for listening. Be blessed. Thank you for joining us on this episode of This Is My Story. Hearing these incredible accounts of God's work in our lives reminds us of the enduring power of faith. If you've been moved by these stories, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. And don't forget to share the inspiration with others who might need it. This Is My Story is recorded at Victory Church in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You can learn more about This Is My Story and Victory Church in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and be blessed.